As easy as it might sound, being kind to ourselves can be difficult, especially when we are facing disabilities that may hinder our ability to pursue our goals. This week, we will focus on changing our mindsets so that we can accomplish any goal we set our minds to. We'll get into it after I hit this music. Joining me this week is Tony Jacobsen. He is an author, fitness coach, and a motivational speaker. Tony, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yes. Hello, Tim. Hello, listeners and viewers. I'm so pleased to be here with you today.
So, Tony, I was excited when I got you as a guest because you have a really interesting story. You grew up your first days at elementary school, you had to be in a wheelchair due to disability. And then as you got older, you move on to crutches to walking. And today I want to talk about, kids who get bullied, parents who get bullied. We have that negative mindset. Well, should say we have it. It tends to creep up on us. Like, I'm no good. I can't do this. I can't do that. And coming from a person who lives with a disability and all the things you accomplished, you obviously must have had, or not saying you obviously, but did you ever have those thoughts in your head? And obviously, how did you not let your disability hold you back? So just go ahead, tell us your story about how you grew up, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, it started way back in the summer of 1971. But we won't go that far back. Tim mentioned I have a disability. It's called Osteogenesis Imperfecta. It's easily known as OI. We'll just call it that for ease sake. But basically, it's Brittle Bones Disease. And so I started life basically very immobile and with a lot of fractures. So I used a wheelchair throughout my childhood. And later on in my teens, I was able to move up to crutches because with my OI, I have type 1. And so I was able to get stronger and move on to crutches as I got into my later teens. And then for me, I actually started to walk for the first time when I was 24 years old. So my early 20s. And so that was a really big achievement at that time. And so, just staying on this topic of my childhood and having to deal with, using a wheelchair, using crutches, it was very much a challenge. I faced bullying all the time. In fact, there's some distinct moments that I remember being bullied specifically, but even in my adulthood, I think back to those times of being in a chair and using crutches, and I was bullied just, what's the best way to describe it? Maybe not intentionally or purposefully, but I was bullied kind of like unintentionally maybe by a lot of people that I didn't really realize until my adulthood. Because when it came to doing things in my adulthood, when all of those thoughts came rushing back of, am I good enough? Should I be here? Are they judging me? Can I do this? Even like physically, I would have those thoughts come up. Things would rush back into my memories from my childhood and from my early adulthood years that I never thought were quote unquote bullying, but they were. So it was a lot of discovery.
What was going on? What was the unintentional bullying?
I think a lot of it was somewhere people would make offhanded comments. Okay. That was a big thing where, it was a lot of, I grew up around, a lot of my friends, a lot of my guy friends, we would joke around with each other and stuff. But I think there were times that things would cross the line and I wouldn't say anything. And I would get an emotional response from it, but I wouldn't do anything about it. So I feel like those were the unintentional bullying moments that I didn't realize were bullying moments, right?
So if you would have said something, you think that would have stopped it? If you said, hey, this hurts my feelings?
Yeah, I think that probably some of it, maybe, because it depends on who you're talking to. I think that some of my more rational friends and some of my true friends who could understand, and maybe, as kids, it's hard to understand our emotions and understand, especially not only our own emotions, but what another kid is feeling, right? So I'm sure that there are some of those friends or people in my life that I could have said something and maybe they would have understood and maybe changed the way they said things or changed the way they approached me. But I'm sure there's a ton of them that would never understand. I faced that in my adulthood, right? Where my young adulthood, I would say things to people and they just wouldn't change or wouldn't even understand what I was saying. So I think that saying something is important. It takes confidence though. And that's something that I didn't have any really strong role models in my life to teach me confidence. We didn't have the internet, right? So I wasn't able to see the amount of, because now it's easier for anybody to really get their message out about, having confidence and how to deal with disability and growing up with a disability. Back when I was a kid, we didn't have any of that access. So in real life, I just didn't have any strong role models for that. So I grew up with a lot of self-confidence where I was just not confident with who I was and my disability and all of that.
Now, were you confined 100% of the time to a wheelchair when you were younger, or were you able to get up and move?
Yeah, I was not confined to it. I didn't have to use it. I used it primarily to get around, but I could stand up on my feet for small periods of time. I was mobile with like walkers and crutches a little bit during those years. But during those years, I mostly was broken. I usually had a broken leg like all the time. I mean, I would break and heal from it. And then 6 months later, I'd break something, or 2 months, 3 months later, I'd break something again. So there was very little time, but I did go back and forth.
How did being in a wheelchair, how did you feel like you were getting treated differently than the other kids that probably made you stand out? Or did you experience any like that special treatment? I guess I don't know if that's the right word to say.
Yeah, I think it is. Definitely when I was in elementary school, I went to a school that was specifically for children with disabilities.
Okay.
So it was a little easier to fit in, right? Because we all had kind of something going on. So it was easier during those years. We just kind of dealt with the regular trying to fit in stuff, not having to deal with the disability. But then when I went to quote unquote a regular school, normal school, the first school I went to, I was literally the only kid in a wheelchair that would use a chair. And that was crazy for me. That was like a crazy moment because I just didn't understand how to navigate that.
How old were you?
That's when I was, gosh, I want to say seventh grade.
Okay. Junior high, so about 12, 13 years old.
Yeah, 12 or 13. And so, pivotal years. And I was struggling. I was really struggling during those years to find my identity, figure out who I was. And I immediately kind of went to do my best to deny my disability and to really not make it a part of me. Like, oh, I'm not disabled. I don't have a disability. I went kind of that route, and that stuck with me like through my early adulthood too. So that was my, I guess, defense mechanism to try and combat any of the negativity that would come from people's views of my disability.
So growing up in a wheelchair, did people offer you like a lot of assistance where you're like, hey, I can do this on my own. I don't need your help. Did you experience a lot of that? Did it make you feel uncomfortable, or did you ever get annoyed from that type of stuff?
Yeah, I would say it was about 50-50 for me.
Okay.
Um, you know, uh, Everyone will always be helpful. It's hard. I don't think it's difficult to talk about it, but it's hard to remember those times when I would feel annoyed because now I understand as an adult that people are just trying to help. And I firmly believe that it's good to receive help. But back then, there were 50-50. I would say sometimes I would say, oh, I got it. And sometimes I would just receive the help. But initially, though, when I would say I got it, it was more from a sense of I really do have it. Like I don't need help right now. I've got it okay, and I can do this task. So that's where a lot of my rejection of the help during that time came from. It was really literally just because I knew I could do it, or I
Yeah.
could, I didn't need help. But I didn't get annoyed too much at that. I wasn't thinking that they were thinking I couldn't do it, sort of thing, like in a negative way.
So Tony, when you were in high school, during high school, like especially junior high school, we started getting the opportunity to play high school sports. What was your goals, or did you have any hopes or dreams of playing high school sports, even though you're confined in a wheelchair?
I really didn't think about it too much until high school. So I started high school using my wheelchair in school. And during that time, I had a lot of friends that were playing sports at the time. I wasn't very active, like just kind of throughout my life. We were active in our chairs. We would do a lot of types of things, but there wasn't anything formal. So in high school, I really did start to get that itch of like, yeah, I want to participate. I want to get in, like during PE class, like I want to do something. And during those years, it was a long time ago, the teachers and the coaches, they didn't really know what to do with kids that have disabilities when it came to PE. So a lot of the times I would just kind of sit around. I would do like office duty or like do things that weren't physical movement. So for me, it was about really trying to find something that I could do. And luckily during that time, I was really into basketball. So I was part of the basketball team. I remember keeping score for the team. I remember being like an assistant to the assistant coach, right? Like that sort of thing, wherever they could start to involve me. The coach at that time was really cool. So, and I even remember a time where he let me come to the tryouts for the C team and like actually do a little wheelchair basketball with him. And I remember that it was really great because that sparked my interest in starting to get physical. Because, with my brittle bone disease, it was very hard for me to even wrap my head around being physical because I just was always thinking I don't want to break, right? I just want to avoid breaking a bone. So that was always in my mind. And so early in high school, it was, it started coming around where it's like, yeah, I'd like to do something. I'd like to move. So luckily, I met a gentleman who was a coach at the school. He also used a wheelchair and he played wheelchair basketball. So he actually taught me, he took me under his wing and he showed me how to play and he taught me the game. And we started playing. We played for a few years, even after high school. We played wheelchair basketball together. And again, I was very cautious of, my disability, making sure I was a point guard. So I made sure I stayed out of the key and I was just shooting and passing and I was very fast. So that was good. But that was kind of like my touch point into sports at the time. So I tried to, be there in school as much as I could around sports. But it was really when my introduction to wheelchair basketball that showed me that I could even do something physical, which was a big breakthrough for me at that time because, like I said, there was times that I never thought I could do anything like that.
Going back to Phy class, when you had to sit on the side while the other kids did Phy, how did that make you feel?
That made me feel alone. I was very alone during those years. I remember just thinking, I mean, that was like the main feeling, a little depressed and just alone. Like, gosh, nobody really understands what I'm going through because I can't participate. So that was like the main thing. Luckily in high school for me, I had a couple of really great friends that could care less about the disability that would support me and come over and hang out and, and talk to me and kind of get my mind off of it. But yeah, I mean, it's just that loneliness of like, man, here's something else that I'm not being able to given the chance to participate in.
So after high school, you transformed into crutches. Was that due to yourself being more active in sports, playing basketball, or how did you get that transition from wheelchair to crutches?
Well, that actually happened simply because I was starting to get a little bit stronger with OI. Like once you're past puberty, your body starts to, kind of operate normally. And so my legs just naturally started to get stronger. I was spending less time using the chair, like at home to get around. I would maybe, hold on to things or take a couple steps and like, grab onto stuff, like really always holding something or using my crutches or a walker. I remember using a walker during certain times. And then what happened was really going into my senior year at high school, I remember telling my parents, I was like, I want to use my crutches at school. And so they were really worried. They got really worried, immediately because being on the crutches is just more dangerous for me. If I get bumped or hit or, you know, kids running around, they're going to see a wheelchair before they see someone on crutches. So for me, my parents were really, really worried for me. But for me, I was like, it was almost like a sense of, let me do this because I want to prove to myself and I want to just be on crutches at school. I don't want to be the only kid in high school that's using a wheelchair. Because at that time I was, even
Yeah.
in my high school. And so that's kind of the big push that got me to start using the crutches more. So it turned into full time because then I started walking at school using my crutches. And then the only time I would then use the chair was anytime I got injured, because I still got injured and still had fractures. And then when I went to go play basketball, that's the only other time I would actually get into the chair and use it. So that was the push to have me get onto crutches.
So what grade were you in when you went to the crutches?
That was my senior year, 12th grade.
Okay, so
Yeah.
So a lot of people, when they attempt new things, we have that negative mindset like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to fail. For you, it's different because if you would try something new, it was going to be literally a broken bone, where most people, for them, it's just going to be, maybe some shame on themselves. But for you, you were gonna experience, physical pain if you tried something new. How did you overcome that mindset to say, you know what, I don't care what happens, I'm gonna do this anyway?
Yeah, you bring up a good point because it was very much both at play, the physical aspects of it and the mental aspects of it. And would always face both at the same time because anytime I had a fracture was pushing me back mentally and psychologically, like, years. It would just crush me because I knew that then anytime I would have a break, it would take me out. Like I would have to be laid up. I would have to, maybe have a surgery, be in the hospital, stay at home, laid up in bed. Like all of those things I knew were a repercussion from or a consequence of if something happened to me. So it was all mental because no matter what happened, even if as I started to walk on crutches, that thought was the one that always stayed in my head. And so it was a lot of me. I think during that time, it was a lot of me playing the denial card of my disability and really trying to say, I'm not disabled. I'm not disabled. Like I don't have this. This isn't going to affect me. I'm normal. I'm normal. Like I would keep kind of playing those things over and over in my head. And honestly, those things helped me during that time. As I got older, I realized that those were hindrances for who I really am. But it did help me during that time to kind of get through mentally the space of just attempting something new. So I stuck with it, and I used it for when it was good in my life.
Yeah. So during that school time from elementary to high school, was there ever times where you just didn't like yourself? Like, damn it, in this wheelchair, I'm not going to be like these kids. Why can't I do this? Like, were the point where you're just hard on yourself for I should say for no reason. You had a valid reason,
Yeah.
because you had physical punishment if you messed up. But I guess what
Yeah.
I'm trying to ask, when were you ever just upset at just like, why did I get this life?
Yeah. All the time. All the time. That was a consistent thought for me, as I'm sure it is for a lot of kids that have a disability that don't have the positive reinforcement and support from their family or, circle that's around them. I was constantly in that battle of, yeah, why me? Why me? Why this? And I think that, you know, I always felt like there was something more for me in life, not necessarily physically, but just overall. Like I was a very creative kid. I used my imagination. I would create a lot of things. So I always knew that there was something more for me, but the actual physical disability and the physical aspects of life really did hold me back. And I did deal with a lot of just self-doubt. I mean, I would say my entire childhood was filled with self-doubt, and even into my young adulthood, it was always just self-doubting, second guessing. And, I was just filled with that because of everything that I was experiencing.
So then, was there a moment in your life that made you say, hey, you know what, today I'm going to use my crutches?
When I went to the actual transition to actually wanting to use them more,
Yeah,
Um,
what was like a
that
shift?
was a wanting to prove myself. I think it was wanting to not only prove it to myself that I could do it and that I could not only spend more time on my crutches, because at that time it was very much like, well, I would get tired, my legs would get sore. I had never really walked around. So there were certain circumstances physically that had me using the chair more. But for me, it was like, well, yeah, I just want to prove to myself that I can do it. And I want to prove to everyone else that I can do it too. So there was a little glimpse of that, of what now I realize was, yeah, proving it to myself is a big deal and showing that I can succeed and actually achieve something greater for myself. And also, if I show someone else that I can do it, then maybe their attitude towards me will change. And so that was a big part of it, where it was like, and I saw that and I saw it happen, each stage of my life has been that each like physical achievement that I've had, it changes the way people around view me and see me and treat me. So during that time, it definitely had an effect on everybody.
So when you made that change, you mentioned that your parents were afraid. Were there anybody else like in school afraid for you leaving that wheelchair, going to crutches?
Yeah, I would say probably. I had my best friend Cliff. He would always protect me. So he was definitely like thinking, because he knew the consequences, because I had known him for a few years. And so there was him, my good friend Nolan. There were certain people that knew what would happen if I was to break something. So I know for sure they would say stuff to me too, like, hey, watch out, let's go this way. Oh, they would kind of look out for me. Luckily I had them. Everyone else could care less, but or
Did it ever
couldn't
make
care
you
less.
second? Did it ever make you second guess your choice? Like maybe I should just stay here a little bit longer, or give it a week?
No, I think at that point I was in a state of mind that kept me being careful. Be careful is a huge deal for me, like that statement, be careful. So I think at that point I was in a state of mind where I knew how to take care of myself, meaning I knew what to avoid, how to move around in a safe way. I kind of knew what I needed to do to not get bumped or hit, or, and accidents happen, but I kind of knew during that time what I needed to do. So I wasn't just
Yeah.
getting on my crutches and going crazy. It was like, no, I was very safe. I was very restricted. I'm very restrictive on myself. So I didn't ever second guess it. I kind of knew, okay, I have to do this. Let me just keep going.
So when people are, they set a goal, but they're afraid to pursue it because they are being careful, which can hold them back as well. I'm going to fast forward here a little bit. You with your bone disease, you went from wheelchairs to, was it a marathon? You ran a marathon, you ran some races.
No, I actually ended up running a 5K,
Okay.
which was, it's not a marathon. Haven't done a marathon yet, and that was many years later. Yes.
Okay. So when you go train for a 5K and with someone with your condition, I don't care how careful you are, the road's not friendly. There's rocks. My daughter, when she ran her first 5K, she fell over at the finish line. I don't know how she did it. How did you get to that mindset? Because you had to know that there's a huge risk in running a 5K, especially with someone with your condition. How did you get to that mindset where I'm going to do it? I don't care.
Yeah, for me, it was a big transformation. I talk about it in my book, and the transformation for me came later on in life, in my 40s, early 50s, where, I became really unhealthy after I started walking because of the lack of physical movement. Through that unhealthy lifestyle, I had a huge health scare that had to do with my heart, and that made me want to learn how to properly move for me and with my disability. So during my big transformation at that time, I went through the process of not only learning all of the mental blocks that I had and really trying to fight those things and get rid of them, but I trained physically. I started to learn how to move myself properly, which was important because even though I have brittle bones, I can still exercise and I can still lift weights. I just needed to do it in the right way. So, I went through a period of learning I like to say, how to work with my disability instead of it having it work against me, and learning what I could do instead of what I couldn't do. So through all of that process, through, overcoming all the psychological breaks, all the psychological walls and things that I had put up, I just physically went through it and, came out the other side doing things that I never thought would be possible, like jumping and running. So when I did run and train for the 5K, it was a totally different world because now I was on my feet. I was moving in a way that I understood was good for me and making me stronger at the same time, which was something that I never really understood early on in life. And I always like to say that, I spent so many years moving to protect my body, but then it changed and I started to learn how to move to strengthen my body because those are two very different things. And once I learned that, it was just a complete, 180 for my life. And I understood now, okay, I can do this. There's a lot of things now I know I can do. There isn't that mental block of being careful anymore.
So you set a goal to run the 5K. What was that little voice in your head telling you not to do during that time, and how did you overcome that? Because we all experience that little voice syndrome. When we start something and our bodies start, right? People call it the little voice syndrome. It's part of your fight or flight. It's our body trying to say, no, 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 that's not safe, which can hold us back, from bettering ourselves as a person. How'd you fight that?
Yeah, my biggest thing was because I absolutely did get those things. It took me not forever. It took me many weeks and months to do my first box jump, right, in the gym. That was a big thing I had to overcome because my feet had never left the ground together, right, in my entire life. So overcoming it during that time and me actually achieving that goal helped me then to, when it came to doing the running, was precursor to me figuring out how to do it. So when I did get that doubt of like, oh man, could I go? Because a 5K is only a little over 3 miles, I think. And
Yep,
so,
3.2.
yeah, 3.2. So I was like, can I actually run for 3.2 miles? Like I had run for short distances on the treadmill, but it was different. It's different. It's a way different, like you're saying, when you're actually out there on the concrete and you're moving and, there's people around you and it's a whole different kind of scenario. So I did have a lot of doubt and worry. I started worrying. I was like, oh man, am I going to be able to do this? My wife and I set we went and signed up. It was the Color Run out in Los Angeles. So that's a whole spectacle within itself. So we were really excited about it, but I did start to get those little worry thoughts in my mind. But what I did was I just kind of broke it down into individual, like smaller goals and tasks. So I just, I made sure that I had good shoes, right? Like that was kind of the first thing. Okay, I got to get some good running shoes that are going to protect my ankles and be good for my stride and make sure I don't, I can be stable on my feet. Then it was like, okay, I got to start doing some shorter distances. How far can I go at an actual kind of run? And for me, a run is, it's a slow jog. Let's put it that way. So it was just kind of starting to see, okay, how far can I go? How long can I go? And then I just started training slowly but surely leading up to it because it was about a 3 or 4 month time before. And so it was really kind of setting those smaller goals leading up to the bigger goal that helped me to overcome the doubt, because then I was just kind of proving to myself, oh yeah, you can go for this distance. You can go for this length of time. And so as I was achieving those things, by the time it came, race day, it was just a totally, I was still nervous that day, to tell you the truth. And, I didn't run the entire time. I had times where I slowed and walked and, but it was much easier for me to come into it and be like, okay, yeah, we're going to do this.
So now what you do for our career, you are an adaptive fitness coach. How do you work with clients such as yourself that, you experienced, being in a wheelchair and going to crutches? How do you inspire your clients to pursue their dreams? First of all, I guess, how do you change their mindset? 'Cause I'm sure when they come to you, they're like, well, I would like to do this, but I can't do that. They're not loving themselves the way they should. How do you inspire people to change that mindset? Say, hey, you can do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, it is a very much, when people come to me, the first questions are always, well, what exercises should I do? What can I eat to lose 10 pounds? Like they're the kind of top level questions. And most of the time as I start working with my clients, it is a lot of mental work that we do at the very beginning. And we spend time and we talk about stuff. And what I do is I start to, help them to understand what their disability really means in the equation. Because a lot of people will like do what I did, whereas like they just deny the disability, where it's like, oh, well, that's not part of it. It doesn't really matter. I can still do these things. When they come to me, they're coming to me because they've hit a roadblock for themselves where they're not sure what to do next. And so, it's my job to kind of investigate, ask the questions, and then start to guide them in the right way, not only mentally thinking about how to work with their disability, but to understand the realities of what their bodies are capable of at the time. Like I said, I really focus on what we can do instead of what we can't do, because everybody that comes to me immediately brings their list of the things that they can't do. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. We're not going to talk about that list. We're going to focus on what you can do. I always start there, and it always starts, with a few things, a few small things. We set some goals, and then we work mentally through those things, and then also physically through those things. And we just start achieving goals little by little, and eventually, everyone gets stronger and healthier.
How do you handle the excuse that starts with, but, yeah, but, how do you work with I guess,
Yeah,
how do you teach people like, hey, there's no such thing as, yeah, but, because that mindset's going to keep you back to where it's at. How
yeah.
do you get people
I
to
think for me,
get
I
rid of
know
that?
exactly what you're talking about. And I attribute what I do now to my time doing improv comedy. There's a big saying, it's called yes and. So, a lot of what I do with clients is I say, okay, that's great. Yes. And what's the next solution? What's the next choice for you? So if anybody comes with their, yeah, but I'm like, yeah, that's great. But what's an option for you? What is a choice for you? So, making people make choices on the fly is good, because a lot of times, it's funny because with a disability, a lot of us, we make choices all the time, and we're forced to make choices all the time that someone without a disability is not having to make. So we are actually very experienced with making choices on the fly and learning how to adapt.
Yeah. Like,
So
should I
when it
climb
comes,
those stairs today? Should I
right,
go up those
right,
steps? I don't
right.
have to worry about that. You obviously have to worry about climbing steps. I
Yeah.
don't. I mean,
I
that's,
have to think about, there's things that I think about, like a slippery floor. Anytime I see a wet floor sign, that immediately I'm starting to think about different things. So, it's very different. So I always encourage my clients, and I get them to make these correlations where it's like, look, you're doing this over here in your normal life, just making choices and finding ways to adapt. So when it comes to this exercise, what are we going to do to adapt it? How are we going to make it fit your body? And then they get that correlation, and then they get that aha moment where they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. How do I do this bicep curl differently to make it work for my body? It's like making these little correlations for my clients is very important to like help them to see what they're capable of doing, as opposed to what they're not capable of doing. So it's a lot of that work.
do you get people who get frustrated, like, okay, I've been training for a month, I'm not seeing any results yet? How do you handle that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, that's normal for anybody, that's normal for anybody, disability or not. So, but for someone with a disability, I think there's that added layer of disappointment that can come into play. Because again, just with a disability, and depending on what your situation is, there's a lot of disappointments in life where you're not able to do something, where you are restricted, where you are not given access, etc. And so when we're talking about something specific when it comes to fitness and, either maybe dropping some weight or getting stronger, trying to, increase weight with certain exercises, again, I just remind my clients of the things that they currently do in life. And I say, with this, it's kind of the same thing. You can't be disappointed because it's just going to take a little bit more work. And so again, it's making that connection to just normal things that kind of happen in life and showing them, it's going to take consistency. It's going to take accountability. You got to do the work. You can't just, think that you're going to start and then stop and then you're going to have results. So a lot of it is just basic coaching as far as fitness coaching and saying,
Yeah.
showing people, well, you have to eat right. You're not going to just exercise. You got to eat right. Oh, but then the added layer of having a disability can bring about some quick disappointments where I have
Yeah.
to really be careful and really say, hey, I understand it's disappointing, but it's all good because there's a way to get through this. And so, it's just guiding them through that.
I guess a lot of it, you also have to kind of do your own investigating, like, well, how do you feel now compared to 1 month ago? Can you move a little bit better? Um, does your does your brain think clearly? Yeah, less brain fog. I
Yeah.
guess you kind of have to ask a lot of those questions to really show these people, yeah, this is working. You may not see the physical parts right now. You maybe can't see it, but you can start to feel it right
Yeah.
away as
And I
well.
set goals. So, I'm very big on setting goals with my clients from the get so that we can make sure there is something measurable so that they can see results. So, even when I tell clients, okay, a lot of my clients, I'm like, okay, I just want you to work out 3 times this week. These are people, some of my clients have never worked out, right? They've never really had an exercise program that they've followed. So for me and my clients, it's like really looking for those goals, those short-term goals to start to show them success and show them that things are working. And eventually they start to come around and they say, man, I'm feeling much better. Oh, I have so much more energy. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Those are the ancillary goals that come with the goal of trying to work out 3 days a week. So it's
Yeah.
like, again, just showing them that they can do it and having these, different types of goals. So, but I feel a goal is very important. You got to have something that's measurable. Otherwise, you will lose steam. You're going to lose steam right away.
So before we end here, I want to talk about like the mental disability, which could be depression, just negative thoughts, that damn little voice syndrome. There's people who they wanna improve their body, but they tell themselves they can't do it, or I'm just too depressed to do it. There's always something, there's always a yeah, but in their life. What's your advice for those people to shut that off and just go do it?
I'd say the number one thing is you just have to start where you are. Because a lot of folks will have that doubt. And I think that doubt comes from a lot of different things. So it's, they're not ready. They've never done this. They don't know how to do it. Like all these little questions that come up. And I think you just have to start. You just have to do an action. You have to be in action towards whatever that thing is you want to do, whatever it is. If you're like, I want to start to exercise, well, you have to do an action towards that. So whether that's doing some research on exercise, talking to your friends about exercise, looking for people that you might know in your family or in your circle of friends that actually does exercise and maybe asking them some questions. I think there's whatever that little action is that you can do towards it, just do that and then do that over and over and over again. And so you start to build the formula for you. So whatever it may be, but to get through that doubt, like it really does take action. You can't
Yeah.
just sit in the thoughts of it. You can't just continuously sit there and say, well, when I get this, then I'm going to start that. You can't do that. You have to just start right now and take that first step.
Is there any simple thing a person can do? Say they're sitting at home, they're feeling depressed. Anything a person can do to get that simple extra boost of dopamine in their system? Because when you get dopamine in your system, you feel really damn good. And for a lot of people, dopamine comes from fast food. We don't want to do that, especially as Dr. Fitness coach. What are other ways to increase that dopamine up to get our mindset to start thinking more positive?
Yeah, I think for each of us individually, we have to really find out what are the positive ways that we get that dopamine hit. So, like you're saying, a lot of us, we don't even understand that, eating junk food helps us get that hit. We don't understand that, I know a lot of people, they enjoy like playing video games or something where they get that hit, or they go to
That's where
social
addiction.
media.
That's where the addiction comes from. That's how people get
Right,
addicted to things. Is that dopamine hits from the wrong stuff.
right, exactly. Social media will do that to you too. So I think it's first like really doing some internal work to find out what are the positive things that you do that get you that dopamine hit. So it could be, calling a friend. It could be listening to music. It could be, visiting Tony Jacobsen's website, right? Like,
There
hey,
you
let me
go.
go see what Tony's up to. I'm gonna go see what Tony's talking about. because he's always going to be positive. So, it could be something like that, right? Where it doesn't need to be me. It can be anybody else. But, it could be those little things. But I think you have to identify those things first. And, that can be a little bit just like dive into personal development, like whatever you can do to get into the work of like looking into yourself and understanding why you think the things you do, what are you doing currently that you need to change to be more on the positive side. That's a big thing, just understanding that there's work that needs to be done internally to get you out of that depression, to say, I got to find things that are really positive that help me to get out of this negativity. And then once you identify those things, just have them on the ready. Just be, have that phone ready to call somebody, be ready to look at that YouTube channel, be ready to listen to that track or that artist that you love. Like whatever it is, you got to just have that ready to go, because it's very easy to slip into the depression.
And make sure if you do call somebody, don't call that person who is going to be the negative person, because I've met a few of those people where we try to talk about an issue. It doesn't matter. It's all about them, their issues. And they say, well, you shouldn't do that because I've been doing like, stay away from negative people. Do you want to find the people who are like, that's great. Awesome. Let's do that. Yes. Find those people.
You got to find the people that, I talk about that in my newest book. I talk about building your team. And like, that's a huge, important piece of building your team, really finding the people who will support you and they have your best interests in mind, so it's definitely a thing as you're starting to build your team of people that are going to uplift you and encourage you in the right ways.
I think after listening to you talk for about the last 45 minutes here, in reality, it's okay to have someone help you, help you feel better, help you achieve your goals. It's okay to have those networks of people, because a lot of people, I think, they're expected to do it all on their own, and asking for help is stupid. It's dumb. It's being a sissy, whatever. It's not. It's how we get better. And sometimes we can meet people, talk to people, and we can learn something from their experiences, or they can have the exact same experience that you have. So I think people need to realize that it's okay to have help. And don't be ashamed of it, because that's how we all get better. I mean, if you think about it, when we're sick, we go to the doctor, that's asking for help. I think with mental health and, and wellness, it's okay it's the same thing. You go and ask for help, and that's okay to do. I think people need to know that, and maybe they can start loving themselves better if they can just accept the fact that it's okay to ask for help.
Asking for help is a superpower. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot to really get to that point where you feel comfortable asking for help. But the sooner you can get there, the better, because we cannot do everything on our own. There's a lot of things that we are capable of achieving. We're all powerful, especially, I'm speaking to my other folks that have disabilities. There's a lot of ego and pride in doing things on our own. But honestly, once you build a team, once you get that help and you start to see how far that can get you and how much more can be achieved when you have help, you're going to see how powerful that is for your life.
When you say build a team, like, is there a certain number of people I need in my team? What type of people am I looking for to build my team?
Really, it's, the circle of 5. I know a lot of people have heard that number, the 5 people in your life, the closest 5 people are the most powerful. I say, keep it small. The number's up to you, but I say keep it small. Don't be afraid to change it if it's not right, but you got to find someone. The person that's going to be on your team is going to be the person that's going to have your best interests in mind. That's number one. So, as you start to get out there and meet new people, don't be afraid to let go of like old, longtime friends too, because a lot of our longtime friends don't understand sometimes when we're wanting to do better for ourselves. So don't be afraid of like making new friends, finding other people that are going to encourage and uplift your dreams and really encourage you to achieve your dreams. But just find those few people that you can call, and they're going to say, like Tim was saying, yeah, let's do this. Let's make this happen. How can I help you to make it happen? Those are the people that you want to be in your life, and you want to be there for them too, because it's reciprocal. You want to go and you want to find people that you want to help also, that you can contribute something to their life. And you'll see that the circle gets smaller. A smirkle, I'll call it, a small circle.
There you go.
So, you got to create your smirkle, and, it can be just a few people, but as long as you're, making progress, that's what's important. Then you'll know your team is right.
Perfect. Tony, I want to thank you so much for coming on my podcast today. If people want to get a hold of you, you mentioned you have a website. Where can they find that? Or what is your website?
Come to TonyJacobsen.com. You spell Jacobsen with an E-N at the end. You can always go to alwaysunbreakable.com as well. But go to TonyJacobsen.com and you'll find everything I got going on there. You can grab copies of my books. You can check out all my coaching programs and just see everything that is in the world of Unbreakable. I invite you to come and let's get healthy and let's be unbreakable together.
Perfect, Tony. Tony, I want to thank you again for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.